Sima Ruparelia. Welcome to the Underwriting Intelligence Podcast.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. You are now president and active underwriter at Niyam Group. But I've known you for a long time, and one of the most fascinating things about your journey, Seema, is that you worked for successively larger insurance companies, and then you decided to take the jump to be basically a founder of an insurance company. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your motivation for doing that. You know, I've done the big company to small company thing myself, but not at the scale you have. I'd love to just hear about, the career trajectory that you decided to embark upon and what made you want to think about this kind of next step.
Yeah, so look, I've really enjoyed my journey, and every step I've taken has always been about what's going to challenge me next, what's going to expand what I'm doing, what can I learn in. And as I've grown through all these organizations, so you're right, I started at various organizations, but if we start at Catlin, then Excel Catlin, and then jump into AIG, which was huge, and then PartnerRe, and then finally to Niyam. I've always, as I say, tried to think about what will expand my role and my skill set and give me interest, but I can also add value to the company. When I met Bobby, who's the original founder of Niyam, our CEO, and he was talking about his vision in India, it really struck a chord with me. And then aside from really wanting to do something in India from a cultural perspective, given I'm Indian by background, although born and brought up in the UK, and the excitement that I think the Indian market offers us as well, just because it's the fastest growing economy. There's so much going on there. It's a very vibrant area. I really wanted the opportunity to sort of shape the business myself, rather than being a sort of, I wouldn't say back office, but mid office function in actuarial, where you're doing the pricing and the reserving and driving sort of strategy, but not actually doing the underwriting. So the opportunity of doing the underwriting, but also shaping the culture of a company, really making it exactly how you would want it versus, I love all the big organizations I've worked at, but it's hard to shape the culture there as a one person in that big organization when you can start it off the way you want to, and who knows what's going to happen, but let's hope. It just gave me that extra buzz.
That's super cool. There's so many areas I want to jump into there. Maybe let's start a little bit about that, something you said, which I think is a really topical subject of the day, which is this actuarial crossing over from the middle office through to the front office. Because I love the way you framed that. I don't think actuarial in the era we grew up was never the back office function that I think in the previous generations people talked about. But you very clearly see it now as becoming a true front office function. The world's got more technical, it's got more data driven in the way it works. So I'd love to just hear about the lessons you've learned. This isn't the first time. You've always been a front office oriented person, but you're really kind of putting actuarial and analytics at the front of the way Niyam works. So what's it been like crossing that over, and what have you learned, I suppose, from your initial forays into this?
Yeah, so like you said, it's always been something I've been really passionate about. I always really loved it at Catlin because we had that ethos there, even though I was more in reserving on that side of the things. But we had that ethos there of having the pricing actuaries at the forefront. And I took that ethos to AIG with me, and really drove that and drove how we underwrote the business there as well. So I was really proud of what I achieved there, and continuing that journey. So when I came to Niyam, like you say, that's exactly what I wanted to bring forward. And I've hired a very good chief actuary from AIG who's into data and analytics, and we're putting data and analytics at the forefront of Niyam. Having said that, it is a different world to some extent when you jump over the barrier. You can't. I guess I feel like you can't be as purely analytical as you'd like to be. Perhaps you'd never write any business if you're not careful. So
Yes, totally agree.
you definitely have to put yourself in the mindset of what's the right thing to do for the company, aligned with the profitability metrics. But I think that's a key strength of being an actuary and jumping over, because you can put those two pictures together quite easily. especially as I guess I was never just a pure analytical person and could always see those commercial angles. But that is the key difference. You have to keep those commercial angles in mind. And in India, particularly when you're writing the business, if you don't write across the board, the cedants don't love it, right? If you just pick and choose the good stuff, then they're not going to give you the line. So you really do have to balance those things up when you're writing.
It is a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because, this concept of tuning the portfolio is very different to the concept of growing the portfolio, right? And I don't know how you think about that now. And I'm really interested in whether, you apply this philosophy kind of at the portfolio level, at the risk level. How are you thinking about that distinction between portfolio level underwriting and risk underwriting? Because I do think risk underwriting is a little bit more of a luxury that you can have once you've got an established base, right? So how do you think about that? How are you giving the teams the steer?
That's exactly it, right? So I do think that I guess we're doing both to some extent, but it's mainly portfolio at the moment because we don't have that luxury, right? We've just done our first 1/4. We got our license 3 days before the 1/4s, so it was very tight. Like we were hoping that we could get it earlier, but we are literally the first Lloyd syndicate operating out of Gift City. Lloyd's had to apply for a license to get in Gift City itself, even though Lloyd's operate out of India. Then we had to get ourselves approved as a service company as well as the syndicate. So there was a lot, and like the regulation had to actually be changed for Lloyd's in Gift City. So it wasn't that they could just apply like a normal reinsurance company. They had to change all the regulation. And so we had a long way to go, but we got the license 3 days before. We wrote some business by making sure we've been working with the cedants since January. But we didn't have the same luxury of picking and choosing. So very much we looked at it cedant by cedant, and we very much looked at it with an eye to, okay, we're going to offer, I guess, certain surplus lines treaties that we're not that necessarily as profitable, but we're going to offer that alongside these XOLs so we get a balanced portfolio. So that's really how we looked at it this time. And then there were certain things that we just didn't touch at all because even though it was, you could write it maybe as part of a balanced portfolio, if on a standalone basis it was looking really not profitable, we weren't going to offer on it. So there was just some things we didn't offer on. So we tried to be picky as well, because it's our first year, we've got to keep us happy, we've got to keep the capital providers happy. We can't just write anything either, right? And just hope and pray. We've got to be sensible. So
It's a real tightrope, isn't it? And I don't know, do you find now that you're the lead underwriter that your own conceptions about lines of business influence the strategy you're setting up? Or because we all grew up in a market, we have underwriters who tell us, oh, I'd never write like x line of business, I'd never do that one in that territory, and it kind of influences you, right? Like, how have you established an underwriting philosophy going into it with Niyam? Obviously the market tells you a little bit as an early stage business.
yeah, and so it was very interesting because obviously I didn't know the India market all that well. Um, we did get all of last year's submissions, so I'd been looking at them, which was handy in advance. Um, the way I was very much influenced by the London market attitude. So it was funny because a lot of the people who are in India like to write lower down the treaties, and I'm
Right.
like, no, I want to write higher up the treaties.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. And they're like, oh, that's a
Avoid
very
that working
London.
stuff.
Exactly. That's a very London market way of thinking about it. I was like, yes, it is. Um, but in reality, what I found us doing, and when we set the strategy, it was again more about let's play across the board so that we show our intent. And a big part of our strategy was to show that we were serious and we're intent on being in India. And we're not just going to be a small, like we're not there to write small little lines of every treaty. We are there to really help that market grow. And this is the one thing that's really got me passionate about this business is that like everywhere I've worked, I've really loved, but this is like really, in my mind, trying to help a country grow. And I know it's only a small way of trying to help a country grow, but I really feel like we're trying to give something back here. Yes, we want to make money along the way. Yes, we want to be profitable, but I really feel like India needs that extra capital, that extra boost in the economy. So
Yeah.
for me, writing across the board became part of my philosophy to help support that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I can hear your passion come through. And, um, I'm a big believer. We both grew up in similar companies, right, where you see the opportunity for underwriting as a risk absorption mechanism to stimulate the economy, allow people doing important work to take risk and therefore actually grow and contribute. And I think it's a big motivator for us at HX as well, right? If you can analyze the risk better, people can take more risk. Can you give us a little bit of a speed run on the kind of changes coming out of the Indian economy with respect to the insurance market? I think you're at the vanguard of these changes. Like, I'd love to talk about Lloyd's. I'd love to talk about some of the other things you mentioned there. But how are you seeing this as, like, one of the frontier providers of insurance in this new world?
Yeah, so look, India itself I'm going to focus on general insurance mostly,
Yeah,
but there is a bit of life. India itself is 26 to 30 insurance companies. That's it for the whole of India.
it's wild.
So, and the penetration is really low, like different products, but between 1 to 3%, and more on the life insurance side.
Mm,
So when India has a catastrophe of any sort, it can't bounce back like Western countries.
mm,
So they're not even a new government now. The government has basically been working on, okay, how do we get India to be in a developed country, and they're trying to do that by 2047. So that's how we've aligned to that 2047 in our syndicate number. Uh, and as part of that and they've got a strategy around how do they become a developed country by 2047. And part of that strategy is what they call insurance for all. So they've really opened up the market with Gift City, which is a special economic zone there. And it means that you can trade much easier from Gift City in India and set up as sort of an onshore to some extent, treated similarly to an onshore reinsurer, which is what our method is. So the idea is we bring that reinsurance capacity there to give the insurance companies more capacity because capital is tight in India, so that they can really start writing for all. So writing more products, writing more business, really get that penetration up and really support. And then alongside that, there's huge infrastructure projects in India, huge. So obviously with the scale of development, there's construction everywhere. There's not just like building construction, there's rail, there's all the transport is getting upgraded. Um, there's a big drive on trying to beat their targets on climate change as well. So, and then there's a lot of stuff that's state owned. So, like a lot of the oil, petrochemical, all of those things, a lot of that stuff is state owned. And then they have certain standards they have to meet, and they have to have certain insurances and reinsurances in place. So, making sure we've got that capacity to really help drive all those changes is um, a big part of it. And that's what Bobby saw because he was working in the UK for 20 odd years, went back to India, he just saw the pace and scale of change and just knew that extra support was needed.
super cool. It's super cool. The coupling to the economy is so fascinating. In transitioning economies as they develop, there's often this really interesting relationship between the reinsurers and the first parties, the cedants, as they develop products. Do you see an opportunity for Niyam to help on that, to take some of the knowledge you've got, particularly from the London market and product design, and help actually pass that capacity through to kind of help the primary markets get a little bit more kind of innovative in their products?
Oh, definitely. So there was one company I was talking to, and they were talking, and I know it's not the best insurance product in the UK, but they were talking about writing gap car
Mm,
insurance, between the
yeah,
value when you write off your car and your loan amount.
yeah.
And that's a new product to them. So I was talking to them about, well, I used to price that 25 years
Yes,
ago.
I was going to say back in the day.
And I can help you with that. So some of it's like bringing some of the products that we used to use in the UK that are useful in other places, as long as they're sold right with the right commission structures and all of those sorts of things. But then some of it I really think is about bringing that London market expertise to India, because a lot of the specialty risks are sent offshore because they don't have the expertise within India itself. So the more we can bring that knowledge onshore, the more it keeps that money within the economy, the more we're helping with that whole cycle. Um, and then, Lloyd's is a brilliant marketplace because you can partner with other people within Lloyd's to help bring specialisms that maybe I don't have and the team don't have to India. And also, we can really, when there's a complex risk, where else would you go but Lloyd's? So, really helping to bring that ability to write those complex risks in India.
It's amazing. I wanted to ask you about Lloyd's. I'm interested in how that process has gone. It sounds like you're one of the frontier providers, if not the first, right?
We are the first.
Very exciting. So congratulations.
Not the
How's that
first in
been?
India, but the
No,
first in Gift City.
in Gift City, yeah. So like, how's that been? How have you found the process of doing that? And I'm really interested in the strategy you've got with the platform. Can you see, obviously, nothing is set in stone. Can you see the opportunity to leverage Lloyd's for good growth in the foundational years of Niyam?
Yeah, definitely. Look, Lloyd's is one of the only places that a small players like us can start up nowadays, right? If we wanted to start in India on our own, we'd need far, far, far more capital to get any sort of rating, whereas, we've got a decent rating through Lloyd's. I would say that it's been a difficult process, but not because everyone has been trying so hard. And the fact that Lloyd's worked so hard to get this over the line before the 1st of April, our capital providers, JCF, really worked hard with us as well. Our main capital providers, we do have others, but our main capital providers. But Lloyd's were really good. Like, they have procedures and processes they have to follow, and they had to set up new procedures and processes with Gift City. Both Lloyd's and Gift City were really good at trying to drive it over the line, and we pushed hard as well, right? Because we were like, we need this by 1st of April, we need this by 1st of April. It was difficult, I guess, at first to persuade Lloyd's that India was a good marketplace to go, because Lloyd's does already write in India as a tier 4 insurer, so there is a placement strategy. So we're tier 2, so we get to see all of the risks now before the tier 4 people do. So when you're tier 4, you get less of the good risk because the risks have gone through tier 1 to 3. So they hadn't had the best experiences. So it took us some time to show them, actually, with the market, this is really what you would see if you were more of a tier 2. So we had to go through, that was probably what took us a bit longer last year to get through that process. But once we were through that process and we persuaded them of our business plan, and you can understand the skepticism. So it's been all guns a blazing to try and get it over the line in 3 months. And literally that's what's happened in 3 to 4 months.
That's super cool. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Lloyd's has always had to balance these two things: the entrepreneurialism, the kind of trailblazing nature, with quite frankly, the pretty heavy structure, supervisory structure it has. So it's really nice to see. I think you're seeing just huge emergence of these more entrepreneurial ventures that Lloyd's is underwriting, so to speak. It's super cool to see it come through. Did you find your experience of having done work with the Lloyd's machinery helped? I mean, it's a bit of a leading question, but like, is the framework kind of helping you, all of the stuff you've learned over the last 20 years in the Lloyd's market, helpful? Does it apply in the same way?
Yeah, it does. You know what it's been really helpful with, because as a new syndicate, we have to have obviously have to have a managing agency, which is Polo Works.
That's right.
Polo Works, free advertising for you. Just hope you're noticing this. Anyway.
Commissions on the other
Yeah,
side.
yeah. So it's really helped get through that process, because obviously a lot of the work we've had to do is prove that we can know what Lloyd's needs, prove that we've got a framework in place for various items, that we've got the right governance structures, we've got the right policies, procedures, what we're doing with, as you know, with pricing, what we're doing with all of the capital modeling. Everything has to be like documented and gone. We have to have shown that we can do all of the Lloyd's principles and how we're meeting them. And where it's really helped me is having that experience has helped Polo get confidence, I think, in what we're doing. I think that's been the bigger area.
So much of this is about trust, right? It's so much of it. And it's a fascinating connection you've got to make. A new emerging market that's clearly just going to be huge. Like, there's no doubt about that, right? But then and then you've got obviously a foundational insurance provider marketplace. And then you've got someone like you who's actually perfectly connected to bridge the two worlds, right? It takes all of that to come together. I'd be remiss to not ask about technology. You've been a personal ally and champion of mine and HX's from very early days. You're one of those people that I credit, for really the success of the company when people didn't have any understanding or belief in what HX was. You believed in us long before any of that. And I have a personal gratitude to you. But you're obviously now thinking a little bit about that in the new world, in a world that's full of AI, in a market that's completely new, where you're not tuning the portfolio, you're growing the portfolio. So how have you thought about the technology? And you've always been very tech forward, right? Like, so long since before it was popular to use technology in underwriting, you've always been very tech forward. How are you thinking about technology in Niyam's underwriting processes? Particularly with, obviously all of the different machinery you have to actually interact with. You've got Lloyd's, you have the cedants to keep happy, right? You want to position yourself. So again, it's a big question. What are the pillars or principles that come to your mind as you think about technology going forward?
So look, we always wanted to start off on the right foot. So having, all the basics in place before we started, and we have. So we've got policy admin system, which has got claims and border control and all of that sort of stuff. Some of the stuff that's a bit antiquated because that's the way the machinery around us operates, rather than the way we want to necessarily operate. We've got HX, as you know, for our pricing tool, which we're very happy to have. And we've got a number of other tools for cat modeling and for sort of sanctions checking and all the HR and finance systems. So we've got all of those systems already in place. And again, we've done it at super breakneck speed in 3 months. So super breakneck speed for everything. And look, there's definitely things we've got to go back and fix, no doubt about it, because nothing was perfect in that period. But the idea for us is once all that's fixed, we can get all the data basically into, like, we're trying to think differently. We're trying to not be, oh, let's structure everything and make everything like a really you don't need to do that anymore. So we're really trying to think of just keep everything there, keep it as flat, put AI agents on top, use agentic AI, which is just a word I don't really understand, but everyone talks about. But basically, you're right. In my mind, I have always been like forward thinking, and what I want to do is just like you do on ChatGPT, like you do on Claude, ask my data system a question, and it pumps out what I want, and that's what we're aiming for. Now we have to do it in stages because we have this. Obviously, there's financial reporting and all of those things that do need some structure at first because we haven't got the time to put all of that other stuff in. But that's a very small part of what we want to do. And data enhancement, getting all the data, using every bit of data instead of throwing it away is very key to how we're thinking about the whole business and where we can drive value out of that business. Value for the market, value for our capital providers, value to grow the business. And I think I've mentioned to you, I don't know if you've met him, but my brother-in-law is head of IT at the HMRC. And what he's doing there in terms of that is basically where I've got a lot of these ideas from, because he's just really at the forefront of thinking through, you don't need to have all these structures and architecture and
I love that. I think it's great to see, a new insurer like you just inverting that model. We grew up in the pre-AI era saying you've got to get everything structured, otherwise it's not going to work. And, it doesn't mean that you can get away with garbage, but AI has definitely rewritten the rules on how much structure you need through the front door. And you know that, right? You've been a supporter of all of the frontier technology HX is using. And as you think about these agents who are effectively, pieces of technology that can independently complete work for you, you can do things like get all the data in and have the agents tidy it up, clean it up, pull the key features out. And I think it's just going to be, when you think about all of the things you have to do to compete in today's market, how much more agile you can be if you've got agents doing this work. It really is just a huge advantage, right? A huge, huge advantage. So it's super cool to see you jumping into that. And for what it's worth, I would say, people let perfect be the enemy of great far too much, right? It's a bit like what you were saying about the actuaries doing the underwriting. Like, if you try and make everything perfect, you don't underwrite any risk, right? So you need to get things up and running, and then you tidy up the things, when the time is right. And, as long as you've got the most important things working, there's a lot of opportunity to evolve and grow over time.
Yeah, so one of the things that I did find frustrating around working in a large company is you don't have the agility to make a decision and move quickly because you have to go through. And I get it, in a large company, if you didn't have those governance processes, everyone would go run amok. But it's hard when you want to move fast. And I
Exactly.
want to keep that, no matter what size we get to, and obviously we're going to be super gigantic at some point.
No doubt about it.
I want to make sure we keep that agility, and I know that's Bobby's vision as well, that we can move fast and really, we've taken the last week just to chill a little bit out of our
You
super
deserve it.
breakneck speed when we went live on the 1st of
Yeah.
April, but that's a very short break, and we're back to let's get running now and move on with all the rest of the stuff we've got to get done.
Amazing. Well, look, Sima, that it's really timely. Congratulations on getting Niyam up to speed. I'm so happy for you. Like, you are a builder at heart, and it's been super great to see you get it up and running. Best of luck with it. I hope we have you back on the show in a year's time to see what it's been like after year one.
I won't come if we haven't made
yours.
any money. I'll be like, no, Amrit, I'm not coming.
Well, I've got no doubt about that you'll be back, because if there's one person who knows how to bend the laws of physics and insurance, it is you. So thank you, Sima, for coming on the show. Congratulations again. And thank you for all your support over the years.
And thank you again, your team and everyone as well. And it's really great to be here. Thanks a lot.
Welcome. That's it for this episode of the Underwriting Intelligence Podcast. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking. If you did, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone in insurance who'd find this valuable, please share it with them. I'm Amrit, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with more insights that matter in the insurance world. Until then, thanks for listening.